What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the PRO Mormon Podcast. I'm Philip, and once again with me today is my little brother.
Hey, how's it going, everyone?
That's Ben. So, I know you probably got bored in my last episode when it was just me talking, so thank goodness we have someone else for me to talk to.
Bring in the entertainment.
So, sorry if we ramble a little bit. I'm a little tired today. I think I said that in the last episode as well, but we just got back from the climbing gym. He's like a climber guy, and I'm really not, but
Show him your battle
I
scars.
tagged along, jacking me up today.
He's got some good flappers. Mm-hmm.
See that? Who puts themselves through this? Ugh. You're an animal. It was actually a lot of fun. But for someone like me who is, if you don't know this, I am terrified of heights. It freaks me out, but I love it all at the same time. It's this weird, like, I don't even know. Just love it, but hate it at the same time.
I understand.
But yeah, so it was actually kind of funny. I give Ben a real hard time when we talk about rock climbing and stuff like that, because there's like this whole language of the rock climbing community, if you want to call it that. And the little things like, what do they call them? Like Crips, and there's
Crimps.
Jugs.
Crips is a gang. It's Crimps. because you crimp.
Yeah. Oops.
Crimps.
And Jugs and what
Jugs, slopers, smears.
I mean, a whole bunch of
dinos.
stuff. And they're like,
flash red point on site.
and I'm like sitting there struggling trying to get up the wall, and he's yelling all these terms at me, and I'm like, I don't
Flag
know
left,
what
flag
you're
left.
saying. So
You got a double dino to micro crimp.
Well, basically, it was really frustrating because I had no idea what he was even talking about. But it's actually funny. Weird segue here because it reminded me of something that I want to talk about today, which is basically being able to understand the language of the spirit, which I know sounds like a seminary teacher. But no, basically, like I had no idea what you're talking about. It's really frustrating when you don't speak that language. It's the same language, right? But I didn't understand the terms and stuff that you were using. But kind of just wanted to, I know that was corny.
It was good, yeah. A good devotional for freshman year.
But in all reality, it actually kind of reminded me of something that is kind of really profound and important to me, at least, was kind of understanding. I know this is something that's hard for a lot of people to understand, but how the spirit, and that the term gets thrown around a lot, but how it communicates with people, and it can communicate with people very differently. We all have different minds and different ways of processing information. So I guess it would be a natural next step to reason out that the spirit's going to talk to people differently, just quick little intro to that. The reason why it's important to me, this is such an important subject to me. I remember I was about 14, 15, went on a bunch of like church trips, and there would always be like these, testimony meetings where you're like in a little powwow, you're in a little circle singing Kumbaya.
Yeah.
Right? And and everyone starts getting really emotional, and they start crying, and they start when they're bearing their testimony, they get real teared up, and I don't know, I always felt really weird because I'm not a super emotional guy. So I would just be sitting there like, you guys are crazy, I felt happy and I felt good, but I was like, is something wrong with me? Because I definitely don't feel the same as a lot of these people, right? And so I started thinking like maybe something's wrong with me. So I started trying to like work up some tears or something, Christmas Story style. Quickly, I worked up some tears. Right? And just trying to but that never felt right. That wasn't natural. And when you're trying to force it, that's not the right way of doing things either, right? So I always felt really weird. But I remember I was in Institute my freshman year of college. I was probably 18. And I had an Institute professor who was just this hyperactive guy, just bouncing off the walls. His name was Brother Bills. If you're watching Brother Bills, you're amazing, and you helped me out a lot. But he talked about how when he felt the spirit, he never got emotional like that. It made him even more hyper, and he would just talk, and he would bouncing off the walls, and he'd get so excited about things. And right away, it just hit me. I'm like, holy crap, that's me. Like, that's every time I was in like those testimony meetings and stuff, I never felt like this urge to like break down and like hug people and that type of thing. But I always felt this urge to like go talk to people. Probably the reason I started this podcast, right? I when I feel the spirit and I feel that connection, that clarity that comes from it, to me at least, it just always triggered this almost hyperactive emotion. I know it drives my wife crazy. I just start talking a lot.
Yep.
But to me, that was kind of something really cool, and I didn't realize that until I was almost 19. But I mean, I don't know. Did you ever experience something similar? I don't know.
Something. So I've been on both sides of the spectrum. Just depending on the meeting, I suppose. There's definitely been times where the Spirit has moved me to tears. And I think as a general rule, I think I'm a little bit more emotional than my brother. Just kind of how that works sometimes. But
because I'm a man.
Sorry,
Sorry. That was joking. That was a joke. It was a joke.
Was it? And then. But with that, in the same way, generally, like when I feel the Spirit really strong, I go to quotes, I go to scriptures, I just start throwing stuff out there. I start making connections. I make these like huge scripture chains, and I end up on my phone or I end up in my scriptures, and I just for a long time I'll just be like, wait, it connects here. And I look like that madman with like the board up on the wall and all the strings, and I'm like, look what I found. Like, and so like in the same way, sometimes I get hyper in that way, but at the same time, like I will say there's definitely been those very sacred moments where I couldn't think of anything to do besides just weep, you know.
Well, and I think a little caveat to what I was saying, like because I felt that way when I was younger, I felt like everyone else was crazy for crying, and maybe they were working themselves up or whatever. But then I realized, heck, if it's talking to me this way, it can just as easily talk to someone else that way, right? Yeah. So like, I think it's important just because I was saying that, you know, I felt the Spirit in a way that made me think more and everything was clear and I got hyper. That doesn't mean that I think that every single person that like has an emotional response that's fake. That's not what I was saying at all. But
yeah, actually, I think it's important. I just like this verse in Galatians chapter 5. It's chapter 5 verses 22 and 23. If anyone was curious, it says, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law." And looking at that, like, it's easy to see, like, some of these things frequently move people to tears, some don't, right? So, like, love can do that. Goodness can do that. So a lot of these things can be that way, but, you know, sometimes peace is just peace. Sometimes faith will be, you know, like you start making these connections, you start going off. So I like this verse because it shows a lot of the different ways by which the Spirit can talk to us.
Well, I think that's important to remember that the Spirit has a lot of different roles, right? There's is often referred to as the Comforter. It's referred to as the Testifier, right? Like we talk about in Moroni 10, that it serves to the truth. You'll know the truth of all things through the Spirit.
Yeah.
Right. So like it serves different roles at different times. So just because the majority of the time I feel a certain way doesn't mean that it can't move me to a different emotion. And yeah, I think when we look at the heart of what the Spirit does, right, it is to evoke those emotions, and sometimes they surface in different ways. But yeah, so like maybe right. If I had just gone through a traumatic experience, the Spirit doesn't need to be giving me clarity and making me excited and things like that. It needs to be comforting me.
Yeah,
it needs to give me that peace. But then if the Spirit's moving me to, you know, push on in missionary work or whatever it may be, that's not the type of emotion that's going to get a response out of me. I need something that's going to, you know, be a little gung-ho.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the clear ways to see the differences in how the Spirit communicates is receiving revelation. Because I don't know how it works for you. It took me a long time to kind of figure out how the Lord talks to me. And I've learned by asking people, by trying to figure it out, everyone's like super different. Whether it's like how you first got your testimony or specific things or even small things. Some people have like these big spiritual experiences where they're like, oh, I never doubted it. Some people, you know, they just kind of feel good about it and they're like, okay, like I'll go. And so I mean, for me, it's kind of like that, you know, a little bit here, like just a little nudge, like a little bit to keep me going. But I definitely know people that have had some crazy experience. Well, I guess I might talk about one of my crazy experiences one of these days, but like those happen too.
No, yeah, and I think that's an important thing to remember, that because the Spirit and the Lord through the Spirit, they communicate in different ways to different people and things like that. I think that's where a lot of people really have a hard time. They really struggle, because it can be disheartening when, for a large number of people, he communicates a certain way. You kind of expect him to communicate that way to you as well. And that's not always the case, right? So, for example, we go back to my original story. I'm in this testimony meeting, and I see everyone kind of breaking down, and they're emotional, and I'm sure that was such an amazing, powerful experience for those people. I don't want to take that away from them at all. But to me, I was expecting that, right? And when it didn't come, it was weird to me, and I felt like something was wrong with me, number one, or everything was, maybe this wasn't a thing, you know what I mean? So because of that, because I had this expectation, I think I struggled a little bit at first. But then once I realized how the Lord communicates to me specifically, now it's much easier for me to get answers to my prayers. It's much easier for me to, when I feel a certain way, recognize that, okay, this may be a prompting, you know, this isn't just a cool thought I had, you know, that type of stuff. But you need to understand that the Lord, because he does communicate in so many different ways, we shouldn't have unrealistic expectations or expect him to communicate to us all in that one way. Because if you don't, I mean, I'm sure for people who may be watching this that are struggling to get a testimony or something, it's a weird feeling whenever everyone else seems to be getting it the same way. You're the one who doesn't.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Everyone else had an amazing experience when they prayed about it the first time, and it just like this punch in the gut feeling. Well, I can tell you right now that didn't happen to me, right? It never did. Because of that, for a long time, I thought I was the weird one. I thought something was wrong with me. Maybe I wasn't praying right. Maybe I didn't have enough faith. Maybe something was wrong with me. And I think I was just looking in the wrong way for things. And eventually I learned, but it comes differently, you know?
Yeah, I think, so I mean, I don't want to take up too much time, but it was the same thing for me, when, you know, everyone was getting these answers and saying they knew, and I was kind of sitting there and I was like, well, no is a strong word. And I was thinking about that, and I prayed a lot, and I don't know what I was expecting. Looking back, like I don't know if anything less than an angel would have satisfied me as a teenager. And like I definitely got discouraged. And it wasn't until yeah, I almost died in some whitewater rapids, and it's a really cool story where like it was very, very, very clear that it was God who saved my life. And it was kind of like this, he kind of grabbed me and he shook me a little bit, and I remember the day after I was like sitting on a rock outside, and I just looked up and I was like, okay, like what do you want? So I did have a big experience like that. That's very unique, even for me, because even after that I was like, what? Right? Mm-hmm. And then I went back to the Book of Mormon, and I read and I prayed, and like I was in that same boat where I got frustrated. I ended up, you know, like, oh, I'm gonna pray all day and all night. I'm gonna do this Enosh challenge, right? And I did that, and basically what the answer I got was like, you already know. And I was like,
What?
I was like, no, I don't. I want that angel. And like it, and even still, it's always just been like these, besides the river, right? It's always been like these small steps, kind of my whole life.
I really like that, because I mean, when you kind of have that expectation of how they all come, to me, that would make getting a testimony too easy. You know, if the path to a testimony was the same for everyone would have one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if all you had to do was just, oh, I got to do these 3 things, I check off the list, I'm good to go, right?
Yeah.
That's not how it works. We don't all have the same level of faith. We don't all have the same thinking process. We don't all have the same life experiences to be able to get that answer, right? And I think, I mean, this leads into like a whole other discussion about how the Lord answers prayers and why sometimes they take longer and sometimes he answers them this way versus that way. But I think it's important to kind of look into that area just a little bit as well, because I mean, you hear there's a lot of times like where like you'll pray about something and you may feel like you don't get an answer, right? And you may not, honestly, for years. And it wasn't because the Lord didn't want to answer you. Like he was like, oh wait, I gotta go check my voicemails now, and like 20 years later, oh, missed that one. No, it was maybe you weren't ready to receive that answer yet. You know, maybe you needed a certain life experience that would have given you the perspective necessary to understand it, right? Like maybe if it wasn't for that experience you had, you wouldn't have even understood the promptings that you later got. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of a separate topic as well, like how the Lord answers prayers and why he takes so long sometimes. But I think understanding that sometimes it's not him, it's what we need first. Like you need to be in a certain place. You need to have experienced a certain thing first or whatever for that to work. When we realize that, I don't know, to me it's liberating because I'm not expecting something right away, you know? And when it comes, awesome. But I need to realize that I need to work on myself often to be able to get the answers first. You know? I mean, have you ever come across something like that? You ever heard something like that before? I mean,
oh yeah, for sure. I think it's just kind of you know, God won't give us more than we can handle. It's something I believe, and he'll definitely wait until we're ready before he tells us to do something, or he'll give us the strength to do it. But regardless, like I do think it's important to note that, and like you said, it kind of is a different topic, but God answers prayers when it's best. And as frustrating as that may be, it is best. It's not just he likes it, we don't, we'll disagree for eternity. Like it's objectively the best, right?
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. I actually kind of like that a lot. And I think it works. I mean, it's just weird how I mean, this is kind of just as a big subject now, how testimonies are built. But like, I mean, I didn't really get like a full testimony of like the Book of Mormon or like a confidence in the Book of Mormon till I was on my mission. I had read the Book of Mormon through. I had prayed about it. I thought I had a strong testimony of the Book of Mormon and everything. But once I really was able to see the effects it had on other people and the ability it has to you know, really just change people's lives, and that is where it really clicked for me. So I mean I thought I knew, right? But then like 15, 20 years later, you know, you learn something different. It reminds me of, there was this really cool talk. I don't remember who talked about this, but he talked about how basically he had prayed for an answer when he was a little kid, when he was a teenager, when he was a missionary, all this stuff, and just essentially never got an answer, so kind of just gave up on it and just stopped praying. And it was all about why his dad had left his family, right? His dad had left him when he was a little kid, and he just didn't understand it. So he always prayed, like, why would you do this? Why would you do this? And he always thought that, well, maybe I just don't need to know, right? That was kind of what he came to terms with. But then like 30-something years later, when he was just like wrestling with his kids or something like that, it just like smacked him in the face. Like he got this new perspective, and it all just made sense to him, and he got an answer to his prayer right there, right? Until he was a dad and experienced that himself, he couldn't put himself in the situation of his own dad to fully comprehend what was going on. So even if the Lord would have given him an answer at that point, it would have been like him speaking a different language. Yep. He didn't have the knowledge yet for it to work. But yeah, so I'm kind of different there. But essentially, sometimes we don't have the foundation to get the answer yet, right? Oh, that sounds kind of
I mean, that could be one of the things. I heard one person explain it once, that like having questions is a weird example, but it stuck with me. When you have a question, it's like putting Velcro on your brain, and so when somebody throws information, like it'll stick. And that's just when you have a question, when you are curious about something and you hear the answer, that information sticks. Which is always my problem with school. Like I'll study school stuff for hours and it won't stick. and then I'll learn the weirdest things in the world, and I'll remember them the rest of my life. But the weird things are because I had questions, and the questions were answered. And so, one of the ways, we get answers is, if you have a very specific question, you can get a very specific answer.
I actually really like that, because I did actually quite a bit of research into this, the psychology behind curiosity, right? Like what is the purpose of curiosity? Like, what does it do for us? And essentially, they did some studies, and people who were curious about something prior to learning obviously retained that information way better. So they put people in CAT scans and stuff before doing some of this stuff. I'm butchering this. I'm saying stuff a whole bunch. I don't know the scientific stuff, but essentially, the gist of it was they put them in there, and there was actually it opened up portions of your brain, had more activity in portions of your brain for memory retention when you had curiosity, right? So when it's something that you are actually curious about, you'll retain that information way, way better. And I think that goes along with the gospel too. Like, if it's something you are curious about, you really want to know, and you do the research and the search, ponder, and pray, and that whole thing, that's when it sticks. You know? Sorry.
Maybe we've kind of gone along this train and just kind of shared all of our thoughts. One of the reasons I love just having a chill podcast where we just kind of talk about stuff. But to kind of tie it back, with curiosity, the Velcro thing, whatever it is, I feel like God will always communicate with us in a way we will understand, recognize, and appreciate and remember. So whether it's a testimony meeting, and some people who maybe like myself, if we're only comparing us, some people who are a little bit more emotional, we might just appreciate that more. We might remember it more. It might just be more natural for us, and so that just kind of makes sense. Mm-hmm. Whereas you getting hyper, getting excited, that might lead to something that's just more natural for you. So the Lord will do what I think is best for us. So same with the question thing. If you have a question, you'll get your answer. If you are going to be impacted more by emotion, energy, curiosity, you just get filled with this desire to go out and do something for somebody. Whatever it is, that's the Lord's just gonna find what's best.
I like that a lot. And I think the one thing, for anyone who's watching at this point, I know we're 20 minutes in, but for anyone who's still watching that may be struggling to get a testimony, maybe they feel like they haven't gotten an answer to a prayer, or they haven't really felt the Spirit in whatever religion you may be in, right? Because the Spirit can be felt in a number of ways, right? I don't want to limit this to any one religion. The Spirit is very important to be able to recognize those promptings when they come. But what I would say is that strictly because you did not get something when you expected to get something, like I prayed, I didn't get an answer, therefore it's all crud. I would say please don't rush to make that step, right? Because if I would have done that when I was 14, I wouldn't have learned what I learned when I was 18. And I think anyone who's really, they are free thinker, they really think things through, you need to understand that you don't know everything yet. That's okay, right? It's kind of scary, but you got to accept the fact that you don't know everything yet, and you'll never know everything, but you don't know everything yet, and not getting an answer is different than getting an answer that's contrary.
Yes.
Right? So me praying and not feeling like I received an answer is very different than the Lord saying, no, that's wrong. Right? And I think basically be patient. The Lord, I'm not sure what he's waiting for, but he has his reasons, and he'll give you what you need when you need it. You just gotta trust that.
Well, like you said, that's exactly what happened, to me, is no answer, and then I basically gave up, and then it took me coming within minutes of death to wake up and try again, and then recognize that the Lord isn't talking to me the same way as everybody else. and he was talking to me is the thing. That's what, when I said, like, I prayed and the Lord said, you already know, I did. And it was just like kind of that, like that slap to the face, that, that shaking. It was just like, look, like you do, like, just open your eyes, just look. And then when I did that, it was like, oh, okay. And it was the same thing like we talked about in the beginning. Oh, okay. It wasn't what I was expecting.
Yeah. I think that's the big thing. Don't give yourself expectations for how the Lord will communicate with you. There's something my dad talks about all the time, is that we as mortal men, women, mortal people, we should not limit the ways by which the Lord can communicate with us, right? If the Lord wants to talk to me through a lizard crawling up the wall, he probably won't, but if he wanted to, why not?
Or a talking donkey that steps on your foot and crushes you against the wall. Thank you, Old Testament.
Or a burning bush.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, like, let us not limit the way in which the Lord can communicate with us, right? So if you were sitting there thinking, like I said at the very beginning, that, oh, when I pray, I'm going to get all emotional, I'm going to cry, that's the way I'm going to get it. Well, if that's what you're expecting, you're probably going to get a letdown, right? Because,
not to say you will.
Exactly. That might be the way he does it. But giving yourself that expectation that that's the only way that I'm going to receive an answer, that's just setting yourself up for failure, kind of.
Yeah, watch.
Because, I mean, the Lord's like, well, that's not the way I want to talk to you.
Watch, a bunch of people are now going to, like, pray, and the Spirit's going to make them emotional, and they're going to be like, oh, but PRO Mormon Podcast told me.
Oh, man.
No, emotion can, yes, the Spirit is a good thing, and so is emotion. I mean,
oh, exactly. Yeah,
don't want to be a...
So just don't limit the ways the Lord can talk to you. If it's emotion, awesome. If it's, for me, where it gets you all hyper and everything, awesome. Just be open to the ways that he can communicate with you. I think that's a good way to kind of wrap it up. Right? Any last comments?
I don't think so. I think that's probably good. I mean, just one thing, if I may. I'll just... Yeah, there's a talk that really impacted me. I just want to share a little bit from it that I think sums it up to some extent. All right. It's called Waiting on the Road to Damascus by Uchtdorf, not Holland. We got into a little argument. I lost the bet. Actually, I was supposed to give him a crisp cut fry from Chick-fil-A. I ate it, and I didn't give it to him. Okay. But here's what President Uchtdorf has to say. He says, there are some who feel that unless they have experiences similar to Saul's on the road to Damascus or Joseph Smith's, they cannot believe. Right? He says they wait at the threshold of testimony but cannot bring themselves to acknowledge the truth. It's a really good talk. I would definitely advise reading it. Waiting on the Road to Damascus. He then says they wait for Christ to be given to them like a magnificent Carl Bloch painting. I like Carl Bloch. I served my mission in Denmark. Good paintings. I've seen all the originals. Little shout out there, Denmark. Okay. He says, the truth is, those who diligently seek to learn of Christ eventually will come to know him. They will personally receive a divine portrait of the Master, although it most often comes in the form of a puzzle, one piece at a time. Each individual piece may not be easily recognizable by itself. For example, it might not be what we expect. It might not be how everyone else gets it. It might not look the same. Might not be a corner piece, which we love so much in puzzles. Whatever it is. It may not be clear to how it relates to the whole. Each piece helps us see the big picture a little more clearly. Eventually, whether it's 8 years, 50 years, whatever, eventually, after enough pieces have been put together, we recognize the grand beauty of it all. I love that. Because regardless how you dice it up, could be different for everybody. I could have a 200-piece puzzle. You could have a 50-piece puzzle, like whatever. But I love that.
No, I like that
that's
too.
Just what I was thinking.
I really like that a lot. I think that's a great way to kind of close us off here. Just once again, don't wait for that big thing, or don't expect it all to happen a certain way, because you don't know what's best for you, right? You don't know the way he wants to talk to you, right? So I'll actually link that. I'll put a link to that talk in the description below. So if you guys want to kind of read that, I suggest it. It's awesome. But I think we've been going on for about 30 minutes here. I'll try and wrap it up. So thank you so much if you're still watching. I know it's been long. And thank you for everything. We really appreciate the feedback we've been getting, the comments, the support, all that. So please give us more feedback. We really appreciate it. Subscribe. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you name it. All the links to the socials are down below. And yeah, we'll try to keep this whole thing rolling. If there's anything you guys want us to talk about, that's the big one. Just leave a little note about a topic or something that you may like.
That'd be awesome.
We'll try to cover that, because
awesome.
Me sitting here trying to think about things to talk about all the time, sometimes it's gonna get boring, and you guys aren't gonna enjoy that. But I want to keep making this stuff. So, all right. So that's all I got. So, peace out.